Hey folks, Jason here with Dirt Race Life. Check it out. I got my leaf spring Camaro back in the shop and up on the lift. Now, if you've been following along on Dirt Race Life, you already know that we're going to put Rachel in the driver's seat. And this is the car we're going to put her in for her to learn how to drive. In this episode, we're going to start with the front end. Tear it down, go through it, go through the springs, the setup on it and stuff where that you know what we're doing, and then also items to be looking for just in general maintenance as well. All right, let's get busy. All right, y'all, I want to show you a quick hack on how I do something. Now, I'm fixing to tear down this left front, so I'm going to push all my fluid back out of my caliper. The way I normally will just change fluid out, I'll take a C-clamp and I'll push my caliper all the way in, and I just back all of my fluid back up throughout the master cylinder. It's a quick way. It keeps me from having to open the system up, take a chance on getting a leak or getting air or contaminants into the system. It's not always the right way to do it. If you knew you had air in your lines, or you had water, or you had contaminants and needed to get perfectly all of the old fluid out, you would want to use your vacuum pump and draw it through the bleeders. But for me, just changing the fluid out because, you know, I'm going to the next season and I want to have that fresh fluid, this is a really fast, easy way that one person can do it. But it starts at the master cylinder because since I'm going to be backing the calipers all the way up, I've got to drain this bowl completely dry right off the bat. So I'm going to take, and what I'll do is I will drain it down, and then I'm going to take a C-clamp. I'm going to back up this left side, and I'll leave the C-clamp on the caliper because when I do the right side, if I didn't have a C-clamp still on the left side, it would push this side out when I push that side in. And after I push this one in, I'll have to drain it again, then I'll push the other side in and I'll drain it again. And the only brake fluid that'll be in the system is the little bit around in the caliper and what's actually in the lines. So when I put the fresh in, I'm gonna have like 90% fresh fluid in the system again, that, you know, so it's not perfect, but it's really quick and it's very effective for just season to season, making sure you're keeping fresh fluid in the car. It's the way I do it. It's been working for me for years. So get this knocked out. All right, let's go ahead and get the caliper backed up some where I can get that brake pads out. There we go. See, yeah, those look good. Main thing on these calipers, make sure your dust ring is still in place. Everything's good there because heat can damage those. Of course, I don't run the O-rings through the slide right here. These O-rings are missing, and that's on purpose. I don't run those O-rings. Let's see, these are the Hawk DTC 30 pads is what they are. Main thing I'd be looking for here is if they were splitting and pieces were coming out, like if they were starting to delaminate, that would be the problem with those. But like this right here, there's nothing wrong with these. They are good to go. They don't need anything but just to be left alone and put back on. This rust you see right here, this is just from where the car's washed. This is normal. It's just going to come off just as soon as this hits the track. This will clean right back up. So I'm not worried about that. All right, but I have spotted something. All right, y'all check it out. Do you see the problem? Because it's right here and you're in the right angle to see it right here. And I'll show you what it is. All right, so you see where I had drilled out my arm right here for a 5/8 bolt. I've got a heim joint. That's a bump steer spacer right there that corrects the bump steer on this Camaro. Look at the angle of it. And see how this angle is running back more than what this rotor here is? That is in the wrong direction. I had taken a hit at some point while I was racing it, and I missed it. I was busy, crushed for time. I hope it wasn't because I was just lazy, but that's pretty significantly twisted right there. And so that's got to be fixed. And I probably just adjusted it out at the time and let her rip and kept on going. But now's the time to get it fixed. Now, how do I know that it's off? Well, when I looked up and checked, Generation 2 Camaro spindle, this arm should be 2 degrees back the other way compared to the spindle right here. So like if this spindle was sitting at 0 on a 0 plane, then this arm right here, like the top of it, would be at 2 degrees and not above it. It would actually be 2 degrees back that way. All right, and it's definitely running more than what this spindle is in the opposite direction by, it looks like, at least 4 or 5 degrees. Don't get me wrong, if it was only 1 degree off or something, I wouldn't even worry about it. But this much right here, it's definitely changing where the location of the bottom of my heim joint is. That's messing up my bump steer, that's messing up my Ackerman. And probably at the time, I had just replaced parts, adjusted out the toe and everything, and probably didn't realize it was as bad as it was. And now here I am tearing it down looking at it, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's bad. So we got to fix it. Good news is, the spindle right here, I believe, is forged. So what we'll do is we'll get this tore down and I can check my seals and my bearings while I've got it apart. And that'll give us an opportunity to get in here with some heat, warm this up, and see if we can't get that thing straightened up. Try to get it to that 2 degrees difference to what the spindle is. If I get within a degree, I'm going to be happy. But yeah, let's get that done. Before I pull this hub, there are 2 things that I want to look at that are real clear indicators of something more going on I need to be looking for. First one, I don't want to hear any type of a roar. I don't want to be like if I lay my hand here and I'm spinning this. I don't want to feel any vibration or anything. I don't want to hear it going, you know, or something like that, like a roar in it when I'm spinning it. I want that to be quiet when I'm turning it. And this is fine. All right. The other thing, slack. So I'm sitting here with my hand rubbing back and forth. Now, when you put new bearings on and you initially run them, you're going to get some settling that's going to happen. And so like I put a new set of bearings on and I'll run them, one time I'll go to a testing tune or I've run a race or whatever. I'm always going to go back and I'm going to reset them again because I'm going to gain some lash in them at least that first time. But after you've got a bearing that's been set and been readjusted after new, you shouldn't suddenly gain a lot of slack. I'm not going to say you won't gain a little bit because with wear and settling, you can gain a little more over time, but you shouldn't have a dramatic looseness going on here in your rotor. If you do, that's a sign. So roaring in it when you turn it, that could be a sign of the needles being damaged, a race that's starting to crack up on the surface of it. Same deal here. If you suddenly have a lot of slack here, that's a real good sign that you got needles in your bearings that are going down. All right, so that's the 2 things I just look at. These are things you can do during the season as you're doing your maintenance as well. But I'm, checking here, so it's telling me, what to be looking for. This looks great. Let's get it apart and see what it looks like. And y'all look, and you can see. You don't see a lot of extra grease packed in there, and that's on purpose because if you're running a good grease, I just run the Lucas Red and Tacky. I don't run the real expensive low friction grease. But anyway, just on the bearings themselves is the only place that I run grease. I don't load these up and pile everything full. It's not doing anything but just binding the whole hub up and pulling away from it. All right, so this back seal right here, first thing I'm going to look and I'm going to see, am I going to replace that seal? So I'm going to look right here. I don't see any grease or anything on that spindle on the back. So that seal right there is good. So let's see if we can get that seal off without ruining it, where that we can just put it right back in place after we inspect and wash our bearing. Y'all, it's not a bad idea to keep you a couple extra wheel seals around. It's kind of a crapshoot whether or not, this one here is probably not that old, and none of the lip on it or anything's tore. So it's a good wheel seal, but it's a crapshoot on whether or not you'll run them. Sometimes I have pretty good luck, so I'm just taking, that's a sharp putty knife right there, and I have pretty good luck don't get brutal with it. Just walk around it. You can usually get these out and put them back. But I always keep some extras in the box. If I think I need to replace one, I just replace it. And the stuff's getting expensive. You know, and they're not like any one thing you say, well, you should just replace them every time. Well, okay, that seal right there, I think they're up to about $8. Problem is if you just have, well, just replace it every time on everything, every time, everywhere, then you're adding a lot of money to your maintenance. And you might be taking money away from where you need to put it for it to have more impact. And see, I just got that out. I didn't. If you felt like it twisted, bent, or anything like that, then you're probably gonna have to replace it. But it came right out for me, and I'll just put it right back. I'm looking to make sure all my needles nice and smooth, no marks across them, no little pitting, nothing like that. Looking at the race, and you'll see it. You'll see a ring line across it. You'll see a hair fracture. You'll see them in there, unless you've already had a catastrophic failure. I'm just gonna take some paper towels and wipe this grease out. And I'm gonna put the bearings themselves in the washer. This I'll just wipe out. Oh yeah. Yeah, it looks good. Alright, so let's see exactly how much we're talking here. Alright, I'm just going to set this on the threads, that way I know it's level. 2.5 degrees, so it's running downhill this way 2.5 degrees. And then that is running 10 degrees the other way. So 2.5 and 10 on opposite sides, that's 12.5 degrees. And we want to be 2 degrees back the other way. So we're talking about twisting this arm like 15 degrees or 14.5 degrees. That's a pretty good bit. Let's see if we can get it. What we got. Come on, girl. You ain't gotta move a lot. Just move a little. Come on. Come on. You can do it. Let's see what I see. Alright, let's see how much I got. Alright, so we got about 4 or 5 more degrees at least to go. I'll back up a little more here. So I'm heating the entire arm all the way up through there so that that twist spreads across it, not in one spot. And then, remember, your safety is your responsibility. You don't want to do this on a cast spindle. This spindle I've checked and it shows to be forged. And so that's why I'm doing this. And I would never do this on any spindle that is ever going to be run on the street. Because no matter what, you've got to be weakening it to a certain extent. Now I'm not going to quench this. When I get done and I get this thing back to the angle, I am not going to quench it. And my thought there is that yes, after it slowly cools, that is going to make it a little bit easier for it to bend back. But I would much rather this thing get bent than for this thing to break. And so I'm not going to quench it because I don't want to create any brittle effect in it where that, it would break instead of bending. And again, would never do it on anything on the street. But for us, for this, it's gonna be fine. All right, I think we got our heat back up there. spread out. See if I can get the last couple degrees there. Oh, it sure does move easier once you've got her warmed up, that's for sure. 5, 3.3. Yeah, that's close enough, y'all. Quit while we're ahead, right? So that is definitely going to shorten that tie rod end arm up. And so if you'll recall when we were talking about the bump and everything, the length of your arm matching the length of your ball joint to pivot joint, that's your bump. And so, you know, I've got these, and I'm looking here, I've got this heim joint turned way out on this end, and I'm out on my rod as well. So I've got this arm longer to make it work with where this was bent up. And so that was how that I was messing my bump up, because this arm and the distance on the lower control arm between the two pivots had become very different. And so I may not have realized it, but it was messing the bump up. Now we're going to check the bump, don't get me wrong, on this as well before it's over, but it definitely needed to be fixed. So we got that back where it's supposed to be. All right, what's next? Well, now that we got that done, I can go ahead and pull this spindle off, and we can go through and check our lower control arm and our upper control arm, make sure everything's straight. And I think we're going to change that spring as well, so I got to get that shock off there. All right, so y'all check it out. I'm not even going to take the upper control arm off, because see that rotation? So I'm swinging it probably close to 90 degrees here. I'm not feeling any bind. If I feel it like bind up or down, either one, that is a real clear sign that this shaft right here is bent. When you go to do this, if you feel it bind and get loose, that's going to be a bent shaft. I don't have any slack or anything going on with it. It's super smooth. I'm going to leave it. And I've showed it in another video, but I'll take a 1/2 inch chuck drill, and I'll just chuck up on the upper and spin it, make sure it's not bent. And then on the lower, I'll put 2 nuts and take a driver and put on it, and I'll spin it and make sure neither one of these is bent. If they're bent, I'll replace them. You see, I've already got the shock out because I want to show you AK4040F, I think is the actual model number. But anyway, gas shocks, had real good success with them. And I think my right front has got a fairly strong tie down rebound on it. And I'll show it when we get over there. And I am going to change the spring rates for Rachel. I'm going to leave a 900 on the left front. If this is not a 9, I'm going to put a 9 on here. And instead of an 800 on the right front, I'm going to go to a 1,050 pound spring. So I don't want to go way up drastically on the rate, but I do want to stiffen this car up to more of a traditional heavy right front spring setup. Now, I liked how the car drove. I won races with the car like this. But I think for Rachel, I need to put her on a stiffer right front that is going to make the car more responsive to letting off the throttle or adding brake on entry. I want her to start out in a car where that when you lift, or when you brake, you get that definite clear feel of the car rotating. I don't want it to be where that she's kind of having to make the car rotate. I want to get the car where that it wants to go around the track on its own without the driver having to really push on it, force it to do anything. And so for that reason, we're going to take back that right front back up to 1,050 springs. So I want to go ahead and make sure I cover that in this video. Now we're going to do a full scaling on this car and everything before it hits the track. And at that point, we'll do that as an episode, and we'll cover the setup from one end to the other. All right, and then same deal here. That feels great. I think we're good to go. All right, look. I've been doing this on the Camaro, and I forgot about it until I was taking it off, and I just realized it, and I'd never shown this before. This caliper right here, this is a metric caliper, all right? But yes, that's a spindle, that's a Camaro spindle, that's a Camaro rotor, and you see that I'm running the metric pad. And I had done this a long time ago on this front clip right here. And the reason for it is because I've been running this car in races where that I can't run a right front brake cut off, or it can't be accessible to the driver, or have to run four-wheel locking brakes at all times. And so being on a budget and everything, in order to run a smaller piston on the right front and create just a little bit less braking power on the right front than the left front while still having brakes on both sides, I dropped it back to a metric. And the way that I did it is, let me see if I can spin this around. I just welded a nut on right there. I re-drilled the bottom and put a nut on the back of it, and then I welded a nut off the corner there. All right, so I know that seems a little bit sketchy right there, but there's a couple things here. First of all, that spindle's a forged spindle, so that gives me a little more leeway on being able to weld it up, put a nut on it, do stuff like that right there. And they do make an adapter that you can get where you could convert and put a metric caliper onto a big GM spindle like that. Several seasons on that right there on that spindle. Works great. The only other difference that I can recall is this brake pad, and I can see it's a Willwood. I can't make out the number or anything on it, y'all, and I don't know where I got it. I do remember that I got a set of Willwoods in this metric because I wanted something that was a little less aggressive on this right front, but I didn't want to just put an organic on it that would just overheat and come apart. So same deal here. Just push it all the way down, and it's good to do that. All right, since you get about there out of the way, and then we won't repeat everything here on film, but same deal. Sounds good, which is not hearing anything. Yeah, no slack at all. So I'm gonna get that off in the parts washer, wash the bearings out and stuff, hopefully save the seal. If I need to replace it. Check the upper and lower ball joints, check the upper and lower control arms for any bind, slack, anything like that going on with them. And it doesn't look like I've bent this arm up the way I bent the other one, but I'll put the angle finder on it and check it. There it goes. Alright. Let's see. Oh, still in good shape with that one. Feels good. Let's see if I can get this bottom one off here. There it goes. Alright. Looks good. Alright. Get that shock off where I can show y'all what number that one is. Alright, let's see what we got. There we go. Oh yeah, gas is still in that joker. Okay, what we got here? The writing on here is a little bit too faint for it to show up on camera, but the shock is an, oh, let me see, AK1061, which definitely has got more rebound in it than compression. This is a stock mount, and I think that like in the catalog, this is actually listed for like a stock mount for a metric frame, but has worked really well for me on this car. Not a true tie down shock, just got more rebound in it than compression. I think it's 300 and something pounds of rebound versus 100 and something of compression on the shock, but it's worked well. Appears to be in great shape. Got its gas, no oil leaks, no nothing. And like I said, I don't think they've got but maybe a season and a half to 2 seasons on them, so we're gonna put them back on there and run them. And let's see, the spring on the right front was an 800. We're gonna switch this to a 1050. Of course, the upper was great. Lower, definitely not bound up. All right, now that frame is definitely egged out. I'm seeing the bolt move back and forth in the frame. So we're gonna need to take that out and we're gonna need to repair the frame right there. That's a really quick, easy thing for us to do. So let's get that knocked out. All right, so you see I got my washer here, and then that washer goes on the inside. You see I've clipped it where it'll fit. And I'm gonna put my lower back on here because that one's worn, and I'm gonna mess my alignment up if I'm not careful. Well, this thing right here will work out now. There we go. Oh yeah, you get one bolt, you got her then. Okay, she's ready. Now, I got that. Get over here, okay. Just make it up. I'll take a bigger hammer than that. All right, so there's a couple things to look at here. The sector itself, if you had a leak on this sector, now there's oil all over this one. That's because I've had the lines loose and been spinning it around. So a leak before you take the lines loose, that would be a clear indicator. Slack, you know, if you feel a spot in the steering wheel when you're steering it, you know, like a tight spot or something, then that's an obvious issue. But when you get down here and you get everything apart, take and just cycle it with your hand like that. If you feel a spot where it like jumps or gets loose or gets tight, that's something that is going to cause you a problem on the track. That's going to be a place where your wheels are not going to be following, you know, your input from the steering wheel, but you're not necessarily going to know it in the driver's compartment driving the car. So just be aware of that. That would be a reason that you'd want to replace that steering sector. On either arm, feel for any movement up and down. Now, this is a rubber bushing in here, so there's going to be a little bit, but if you've got slack, replace it. The other thing to do is you want to square it up. When you originally set your car up, this is a measurement you've got to write down. All right, so like on my car, on this Camaro, it's 25.25. Just square it. So that's from the grease alamite to the grease alamite, from the grease alamite to the center of the sector. When I square it, and both measurements are the same. So when I take a tape measure and I go point to point, if I set one of these to 25.25, then the other one should be 25.25. All right? Yep. Okay, and I'm still 25.25 when I square it. So that tells me that my center link has not gotten bent, and I don't have a frame horn that has gotten bent over. And once you know what that measurement is and it's good, you definitely want to write it down for a particular car. All right, y'all, on these tie rod ends right here, of course, I'm just going to check them just like normal as far as the studs themselves. Make sure that they're straight, okay? And I'm going to break everything loose, put fresh anti-seize, clean threads up, fresh anti-seize, because I want to be able to adjust this real easy during the year. Make sure that I keep up with which bump spacer is on which side. Check my bolts and make sure they're straight. And I can tell you right now, 5/8 grade 8 hardware, yeah, it's straight. I promise you it's straight. And then this is where the wear item is that typically I end up replacing. This heim joint right here on the steering, it really needs to be smooth and tight. And so if it's got any slack, I'm going to replace it. And what I'm looking for, I'm not worried about being able to rotate easily. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for if I can take my fingers and I can move it forward and back like this. All right, so this one's fine. Let me put this bump back on this side where I keep up with which one goes where. All right, so that one. Now this other one, the same deal. And the bolt's straight. But right here, like I said, we'll check. I'll spin those and make sure that they're good. but right here, and that's got slack in it. And so what I'm doing here is I'm moving my fingers forward and back, because that's the way it actuates on the car as well. And so forward and back, and I can feel it going click, click, click like that when I go back and forth. I'm not worried about being able to measure how much it is. It's not like it can have this much, but then replace it at, you know, some amount. It's like if you can move it back and forth in that shell, that's too much. Replace it. Because a little bit right here is a lot out on that tire under pressure. All right, so I got one heim joint to replace right here. Clean it all up, put it together, get this thing back together. Check this out. So I was going through washing the bearings on the right side and washing the seal, and I did not show any sign of any leaks of grease on that side, but that seal right there had that little whole outside lip tore off on one side of it. So I'm going to replace this seal so it looks like a heim joint on one of my tie rod ends, and a seal is it on maintenance items that need to be replaced. Other than that, I'm going to replace those two items, grease everything, put it all back together. Again, we're going to do a separate setup video where I'll go through and show the scale numbers and towing the car out and everything like that. But I got to get these parts in, get that done. The next video, I think we'll do the 9-inch rear end. I haven't checked it to see if it's square for, like, I know 2 seasons on this car, and it's had some hits. So we'll get the floater rear end out. We'll check to make sure it's square. Hopefully, if it's off a little bit, we're going to try to straighten it. If it's off bad, we'll have to replace it. It just is what it is. But I think it's fairly square. It could be off a little bit, but it's not showing signs of anything bad going on with it. And then I've got composite springs on the back of the car. Need to unwrap them, inspect them, and then rewrap those springs. And so we'll probably do that as an episode. And I'm waiting on a clutch to drop the engine in. So I'm drop the engine and transmission in, but I was going through and I had one of my springs break out on this clutch. My flywheel and my pressure plate were fine, but anyway, it had this the spring pack here that's the torque absorption. I don't really need this for circle track, so the one that I'm going to put on order tomorrow is just a solid. This is more for drag racing right here. It's worked great, but this thing right here, I think it weighs about 5 pounds, and I don't need but about a 3-pound clutch. And there's no rule anywhere. All the rules in all of the classes around here is just on the weight of the flywheel if they have one. It's never on the weight of the clutch. So I'm just going to go to a solid plate. They're only about 3 pounds. And hopefully that'll work great and I can get several more years out of it. If you're looking for something specific on this Camaro as we're going through, we just went through the front end. We're going to do the rear end. Engine and transmission, dropping them in. I'm not sure that we're going to show that as a video. Maybe, you tell me if we're looking for, if you want to go through me prepping it up, setting the time, running it back in on the new engine and stuff. I'll show as much of that as y'all are telling me that you want to see. So just let me know, because we're going to go all through that again on the new motor for the crate racing car. So I got a lot of work here, and I don't want to be too much of any particular topic. So I am looking for feedback on that. Other than that, we're out of here. See you next time.